All right, it's now 14 minutes after 8, and we want to get into a conversation regarding Southern Sudan and the status and state of refugees in South Sudan. But before we do that, let me quickly introduce the guests that we have here this morning. Then we'll listen into basically what has been happening. And to my immediate left, we have Amer Deng. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. She is the chairperson of Women's Bloc of South Sudan. We also have Catherine Peter. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. And last but not least, we have Maria Ketch. Great to have you. Now, the situation in South Sudan has basically been very volatile, and more so for women and specifically refugees. But let's listen into what Amer Deng had to say earlier before we get into the conversation.
Women Bloc of South Sudan as a champion for the women rights in the Republic of South Sudan is a coalition of women-led organization formed to represent the voice of voiceless South Sudanese women who are scattered and who are suffering in the refugee camps and in the IDP camps. Today we want to inform all the South Sudanese women on the recent signing of the cessation of hostilities and protection of civilian and humanitarian access to the IDP's camp.
All right, and now let's start right there, Amer Deng, and there's that signing that was done of the cessation of hostilities, especially towards the refugees. And has that taken effect? Has the signing been translated to results?
Yes, thank you, Michael. Good morning and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
I think we are very grateful to be hosted by KTN. This is not the first time for women of South Sudan to come to KTN. In 2014, we were here. And we thank the Kenyan government for hosting the South Sudanese refugee in Kenya for a decade. And also our children are studying here in Kenya. And Kenya is our second home. Actually, for the time we spent after signing the comprehensive peace agreement in Kenya here in Nyayo Stadium, and we got our referendum in 2011. We are still continuing with our neighbors like Kenya, Uganda, Sudan, and South Sudan. And we are very grateful for them because they have really shown us their solidarity. As we speak, in 2013, when the war broke out in South Sudan, majority of women and children are displaced to the refugee camps and to the IDP camps, and scattered all over the world. So in the recent sign of the cessation of hostilities and protections of civilian and humanitarian access, which was signed on the 22nd of December 2017 in Addis Ababa recently, we want to create awareness to South Sudanese people who are scattered all over the world, and especially for the women who are here in Kenya. Actually, they came to educate their children. Most of them are also educated women, and we need them back home because South Sudan needs manpower and women power.
Correct.
At the moment, there is a cessation of hostilities that need to be implemented. And that implementation need a commitment and need full participation of women. So we urge all the South Sudanese women who are in Kenya and in Uganda and in East Africa, because I know KTN go around East Africa.
Absolutely.
They will hear this message from the Women's Bloc of South Sudan as a coalition of women-led organization who signed the agreement on the resolution of the conflict in the Republic of South Sudan. We are signatories for the first time all over the world. Since the suffering of the South Sudanese women for decades during the liberation movement and up to today. This is a time for women to rise up in South Sudan. This is a time they need to participate fully because we are majority, we are more than 60%. Most of our male are really finished by the war, and especially our sons and our husbands. We have majority of women who are widows. We have majority of the children who are orphans on the street. So this is a time that we need to go back home, establish our country, and make sure there is a development and there is peace in the country.
All right. Let me come to you, Mary. And I'm sure many women listening right now who would possibly want to do what you're saying and go back home, their fear would probably be the fact that, is the country stable enough? Has the signing of the cessation actually taken effect? And are they safe?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, in the moment, it's not like before. So we can say it, you cannot wait until everything got smooth, then you come home. Whom do you think will really prepare the place for you? You should be the one to come and prepare it. We are not the first people in the world to have a conflict. And it is not the first in all over the world that refugees has been in different countries.
They need to go back home.
It is everywhere. So when it comes to an end, you have to go home. So everybody have to come home to establish. And that is called a nation. And there is no any nation all over the world without crisis. We should go through all temptations, and we have to come back and fix it. It does not mean when there is a war, there is no nation. There is a war, there is nation.
But are you saying that currently it is safe for them to go back home?
They have to come.
Safe or not safe?
It's safe. It's safe. See, it's not like before that when there is a war, and in 2013, compared to now, everything is now okay. And you have seen so many POCs have been closed down in South Sudan, and they have joined the villages because they have to go and cultivate. The issue of humanitarian become a big problem. And we cannot depend on UN's support always of humanitarians. We have hands. We have everything. God created us as anybody, like anyone who is supporting us. So we can also come and establish ourselves, bring our children home, see how to educate them at home.
Okay. Catherine, one might argue and say, fine, you're saying women need to go back home and men as well. All South Sudanese basically go back home to rebuild the country. But you're saying this from a foreign country. Your comments to that?
Thank you. Going back home is an ultimate way that we should do. And being in a foreign country like Kenya, which is a second home for us, we feel like we disseminating the information for going home. We mobilizing people, we are educating them, we are telling them that all the parties agreed to sign the cessation of hostilities, which is part of the agreement and the most important chapter in the agreement on the conflict in the Republic of South Sudan. The cessation of hostilities and in the permanent ceasefire agreement. So we are disseminating the idea to move them so that we go back home.
So that you go back
home.
Let me come to you, Mary Deng, on the same question. And fine, you're disseminating the information, but when are you going back home?
Actually, it depends with IGAD, who's leading the process of the implementation of the peace agreement, the AU, and the international community. I think people are aware that South Sudan has crisis, deep crisis, and that one has led our country to economic crisis. As we speak, there is economic crisis. And also we have a scarcity of the human resource. You know, majority of people flew out from the country. So it is our neighbors who will support us. You know, it was said one of our leaders in Africa, Desmond Tutu from South Africa, that in Africa, we depend on the aid from the Western country. But we, the African ourselves, we have resources also to cater for ourselves and to help ourselves and settle ourselves. Like when I mentioned it earlier that we are very happy and grateful for the solidarity by our neighbors, the Kenya, the Uganda, the Sudan, the Ethiopia, and they have really extended their hand to support the people of South Sudan. Up to now, we need that support so that we are helped on how to go back home, because our government, the transitional government of national unity, is willing for peace. Also, the rebel, that I can still call them rebel because most of them are not in Juba as we speak, they are tired. All of them, the government and the people who have been fighting for the senseless war, are tired. They need peace now, and they need to go back home. So we need that peace to be embarked by all our neighbors and the international community, and they support us. As Women's Bloc of South Sudan, we are voice of the voiceless of South Sudanese women, but also we need support so that we can reach the refugee camp, like in Kakuma, we have to reach them. And then also we reach the IDP camps. Yes, we have a voice to speak, but we need to be supported.
You need the support. All right, Mary, what's the plan? What's the return plan? Because you're waiting for all these organizations at one point. You also need support from the countries that possibly you're living in, whether it is, like you mentioned, East Africa. What is the plan for those who would actually hear your call and say, fine, we want to go back? What is the plan for going back?
The plan of going back is the mechanism that the warring parties they have to establish of how to receive the refugees from neighboring countries and in diaspora. On that point, it is the government to be so concerned of the people coming back home, because we can have a support from different agencies of help on South Sudan crisis or establishment of the nation. But it's the government who is to be responsible for that. There is no any UN agents can be responsible for our people rather than the government itself, which is the tribunal right now. Because bringing people back, they need protection in the first place. The protection, and they have to prepare the hospitals, because you don't take a human being, cannot take a human being to to a hall where there is no oxygen. You have to know where you are taking a human being to, and everybody is traumatized. So we are ready to receive them and to pass them through the counseling process, so that when they go home, they don't get fear, including the small kids. They fear whenever something come up, boom, they just heard like a gun shout. So we are very serious, and we need them back home. You can see when they were fighting with Mamao time in Kenya, what's happened? People have to come back and establish, and here in Kenya, we are proud of it now. We can do the same. And that's why we give example of others.
All right. Now, South Sudan's government and rebel groups signed a ceasefire in, Addis Ababa late last month in the latest attempt to end a 4-year civil war and follow humanitarian groups access to civilian court in the fighting. South Sudan's Information Minister, Michael Mackay Luth, said that the signing of the agreement meant progress could be made on resolving political issues in the world's youngest country. Let's listen in.
A reality in South Sudan.
Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. Patience. Amen.
Today we have signed the cessation of hostilities, which marks the beginning of the end of hostilities in the Republic of South Sudan. Today we have signed the cessation of hostilities, and with it we will create the necessary conducive atmosphere so that these parties who were at war would now sit and discuss some of the provisions of the agreement which were unimplementable so that we can implement them. The cessation of hostilities will be with effective 72 hours from now. So this is the situation in which we are, and as of now, we will send messages to all the commands in the field to abide by this cessation of hostilities. So from now onwards, there will be no more fighting, but there will be more talking so that we resolve the political issues.
All right, and Catherine, let me start with you. He says that there is no more fighting. Is that something that you can confirm? There is no more fighting. And politically speaking, have the issues been resolved to a point where now the country can begin to rebuild?
Actually, there's no more fighting since they signed the cessation of hostilities. It's a process. It's not a one-day issue, but they are on the process of putting things in places.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
All right. Amer Deng, would you say that politically speaking, there is solutions that are being found and there's a way forward that is being found such that there can be some peace of mind for those who would want to come back, that it will not, erupt again?
Yes, actually, as we speak in South Sudan, there are mechanisms put in different ways. For example, His Excellency, the President of the Republic of South Sudan, Salva Kiir Mayardit, initiated the national dialogue in the country. And that national dialogue, he called for all the warring parties to join the national dialogue. And the national dialogue is taking place now in the country. So it is a peaceful means. People are talking freely. It is not as before. Before, when you speak, you fear that when you talk today, tomorrow there will be a problem. But as we speak now, South Sudanese need to build a trust. They should not feel that the country is still fragile as before. People has changed their mind, and there is a political will. So let them get the chance, because international community and IGAD and AU have really warned the people of South Sudan to make sure this is the last chance for them to implement the peace agreement. This agreement is ending in August, which the election is supposed to take place. So this is the right time for South Sudanese people to accept peace and come back home and prepare themselves for the election.
To exercise the democratic right.
Yes, yeah, to exercise the democratic right. And they also see the suffering of children and women as a major issue. Even themselves, our men are suffering in that.
All right, now Amer, as we wind up, because we are out of time, when are you going back home?
I'm going this month.
This month, you're going back home. And that's going back to stay, don't?
I'm going this month, but we have a plan to go to the refugee camp, to the IDP camps, to disseminate the peace agreement that is signed so that we can sensitize them, and also go to the IDP camps and create awareness for them in Kenya, in Uganda, in Sudan, in Ethiopia, so that they are prepared mentally. So when there is resources now, it will be a time for them to start moving home, because you cannot just go, even if there is resources, and pick them, though, let's go home. No, we need to prepare the school for children, because most of our children are studying abroad all over. And this time we need them to go to school at home.
At home.
Yeah, and we need to prepare for them clean water, because we have a problem of clean water, shelters, and there are a lot of needs, the basic needs that South Sudanese in the exile need, even in the country. But most important things is the gun to be silent. And we still urge the warring parties to calm down, to make sure that this time is time for peace, because we are tired.
All right, Mary, as we wind up, your closing comments and possibly the message that you'd like all and sundry to hear from you.
My message to the people outside there is that a nation is a nation, is your nation. You cannot change your identification as being called a South Sudanese. Your name, and even God stated in the Bible, each and every nation have a names. So you cannot fade out your names, your country, your DNA of that country to become one of the smartest country if you cannot make yourself smart in your own country. So what I can tell them is that our country needs us. Our country needs all of us. Despite all has happened, the conflict in our country, we compare it with others. It is not only South Sudan which has a conflict. And other countries, you go to Europe, you go wherever in the countries, in other, they are all conflict areas. We always in the news that there are a lot of conflict in the world. We cannot be shaken by a lot of influence, that we have a lot of agents' influence that can tell us that don't go back home. Your country is still in fight. It's a business. We cannot allow business people to destroy our country. Business is there in so many ways that you can see, and when you have a sense of thinking of it, you will see there is an issue. It is not about the politics alone. It is not about being in your country and run away, live in other countries is the issue. When you make yourself weaker, then other people will take the opportunity of using your resources in a different way, making you to be in conflict. So that is my message to the people of South Sudan and our neighboring country that's really been standing with us during the crisis, and to give us more support, telling our people and help us with awareness that we have to go back home.
Okay.
Make us courage. Yeah.
All right, Catherine, your closing comments?
My closing comments as a woman's bloc of South Sudan and a voice of a voiceless grassroots woman. We need them to hear from here that we must go back home. And we realize that the government is committed, since they were selective in signing the cessation of hostilities, which is the most important issue for human life, and humanitarian access. And 3 items that they were chosen. I will say they are very selective in that, and they are committed to do that. We urge them to implement what they have signed.
What they have signed?
Yes,
all right.
We need them, yeah.
Your closing comments?
Yeah, thank you so much for hosting us. I would like to thank all the international community, the IGAD, the AU for their solidarity to the people of South Sudan. And also I urge the warring parties, and especially the strange group, because in the recent cessation of hostilities and humanitarian access and protection of civilians, there are numbers of the strange group who have also signed, including myself. We signed that document. We need to be committed and respect the signatures on behalf of the people of South Sudan.
All right.
And also we urge the international community to support the people of South Sudan, the IGAD, the AU, to support us so that we can be able to take the people back home.
All right, I'll have to cut you short there because of time, but thank you very much. I'm Mary Deng, Catherine Peter, and Maria Ketch for joining us this morning on the situation of refugees who are living abroad to go back home. Well, it is now